The primary focus of our ESL class is to help students to improve their communication and listening skills. With the class being a non-academic class, the purpose of my lessons were to help students with their everyday lives, such as navigating around town. It is important for students to learn topics that would be useful for their everyday lives, and the functional topics used in class would motivate students to learn. Students who are motivated will learn another language faster and to a greater degree, and that is why I included authentic materials and functional topics as much as possible. This is particularly useful for students because they would want to learn things that they could apply to their own lives.
Today we are talking about navigating around town. Does anyone know what navigating means?
In the beginning of the lesson, I like to activate students' prior knowledge so that they will be able to relate to what we will be talking about in class. Research shows that activating prior knowledge can lead to improvements in comprehension.
So my question was, what does navigating mean? Navigating around town. And Aditi said directions. So you're right, having directions to show you how to get from one place to the next. So directions, basically. Cardinal directions. Does anyone know what does cardinal directions mean? No? Oh, north? Yes, so north, and then east, west, south. Right, so these are all cardinal directions. So north, south, east, and west. North, south, east, and west. So these are all cardinal directions. And then you notice in between, do you know what NE stands for? Northeast, yes. We never really say east-north, it's usually northeast. And then what about SE?
Providing visuals in the classroom are extremely important in teaching ESL students so that they are able to have a mental representation of what you are talking about. Not only are pictures important, but the spelling of the vocabulary words. And make sure to have that clearly visible in front of the classroom so that everyone will be able to see it.
Southeast, southwest. Alright, so we have a picture here of Wells Hall. So we are located right here on the map. And here's the Red Cedar River. So what would you say about Wells Hall? Where is it in relation to the river? So is it north, south, east, or west? Wells Hall.
East. East.
North, east.
So Wells Hall from this river. So the river is up here.
East north?
Oh, the river is north of Wells Hall? Is that what you're saying? Yes, the river is north, so Red Cedar River is north of Wells Hall. Or we can say Wells Hall is south. South of the river, right? It's underneath the river, it's south of the river. But it depends on where you are. Like if you are over here by the river, then we can say Wells Hall would be southeast. Right? But I just wrote that Wells Hall is south of the river.
As you can see, the students seem confused about the directional relationship between Wells Hall and the river. I think it would have been more helpful if I wrote this sentence on the board. Wells Hall is blank of the river.
So let's say that we are right here on Chestnut and West Shaw Lane. And we want to get to Wells Hall. So what would we say? How do we get from here to Wells Hall? We would have to go this way, right? So we would have to go, what direction is that? East. So we're going to go east on West Shaw Lane, and then we're going to go north on Red Cedar Road.
The use of Google Maps is an authentic way to tie in cardinal directions in a meaningful way. This is something that students will use in their everyday life, making it meaningful to learn.
So now we have a different map. And we see places.
Here we are looking at a different kind of map where there are various buildings and places like a cemetery, fire station, schools, hospital, police station, etc. Before talking about giving directions and using cardinal directions, it is important to talk about the map itself and what we see on the map. Then we can go over where the places are in relation to the fire station.
And what about the bus station, Bohyun?
It is important to go over several examples with the class and check students' comprehension by calling on them.
Okay. Back of that sheet of paper, you have this town map. So on the back of the paper you have right now.
For those students with low listening skills, I incorporate as many visuals as possible, like hand gestures and pictures with words in front of the classroom. I also will repeat what I said several times, either in the same way or in different wordings, so that students will have a better chance of understanding what I said.
School. If you look at this key right here, the key tells you what it is. So that's the school, right? And what is this building right here? Supermarket, yes. And what about this right here to the left? Police station.
Again, before an activity, I want the students to be familiar with what they will be working on. We go over what is on the map and we go over the first question together as a class. Then the students are to work independently on it. When students are working independently on their work, I first check on the students with a lower English proficiency to see if they need help. Then I circulate around the classroom to make sure that others are doing it correctly and see if anyone else needs help.
All right, let's check your answers together as a class. So everyone.
We checked our answers by calling on different students to read the sentence with their answer. That way, the students are practicing their reading fluency with the use of directional words.
Number 2.
Number 2, sir.
Can you read the sentence, please?
Larry goes sir to go to a
Harriet's.
Harriet's house.
Yes. So what are different ways of describing where places are? So we just talked about cardinal directions, which was north, south, west, east.
Here we are expanding our vocabulary words and giving directions. We go over the prepositional words we have discussed in a previous class to apply towards giving directions.
And we said that like the grocery aisle is next to the electronics section. Or we said, what are some other words that we said? Do you remember?
Opposite.
Opposite. Good. Opposite. We said next. What are some other words? Between. Very good. We have a map. You don't have this worksheet.
In this next activity, the students will be working on their listening and comprehension skills. The students are to write down the sentences that they hear and then analyze those sentences to see whether they are true or false based on the map. I realized that the audio file was too fast for my students, so after they heard the sentences once, I repeated the sentences to them afterwards.
Dry cleaners is between the museum and the supermarket.
Okay, I'm going to read the numbers over again, so listen carefully and write the missing words if you didn't hear it. Okay. So number 1, the dry cleaners is between the museum and the supermarket. The dry cleaners is between the museum and the supermarket. Alright, so let's learn some phrases or sentences. So if you can't find a place...
In the previous activities, the students were practicing giving directions. In this activity, the students are to practice asking for directions. I elicit questions that the students already know and write them on the board, and then I provide them with more ways on asking for directions. Then we practice asking the questions using different locations that they are trying to find.
How can I go to the library? We're trying to find the hospital. What question would you ask them?
Excuse me, could you tell me where is hospital?
Yes, I would say the hospital. So excuse me, could you tell me where is the hospital? Good. Say it and then you say it. Excuse me.
Excuse me.
Do you know
If there are students in the class that can't read or know very little English, it is still important to include them when you are practicing in the class instead of avoiding them. Here I had a student who can barely speak a word of English to repeat after me.
Is. You can use these type of sentences. Like yes,
Here are some other possible answers given when someone asks for directions. I use and teach vocabulary words that students might not have known, like the words blocks, intersection, hit, at the corner, straight, and past. Then we practice using these words by looking at different scenarios.
so here, point A, this is the East Lansing Library. So let's say that we are here at the corner.
For example, students had to give directions on how to get from the corner of Clarendon Road and Sunset Lane to point A, which is East Lansing Library.
How do I get to the library from here?
Although students might seem like they understand the vocabulary words by answering questions pertaining to it and by putting the words in the right context, it doesn't necessarily mean that they can use it in real-world environments. Students need to practice it in a way where it seems authentic, which is why I included a task-based activity where students need to ask, give, and follow directions. I split the class into groups with 3 or 4 students in each group. The students were to work together to write down the directions, and then verbally give the directions to a member of another group. That other member was to follow the directions and find their destination. This was in a role-playing format.
The district court is on the Elizabeth Street.
Here is where the role-playing began. The desk, floor, and chalkboard are marked with street names and cardinal directions. One member is to ask for help while the other person gave directions. The student who asked for help had to follow the directions that was given to her in order to find the destination that she wanted to go to. Through communicating and interacting with each other, students will hopefully acquire the sentences and words learned in class and will be able to apply it outside of the classroom.